Hello everyone and welcome to the as of yet untitled indie series as we take a look at Falling Frontier, an upcoming RTS space opera with an incredibly large scope and some rather interesting mechanics at play, not to mention a narrative-driven campaign set within a procedurally generated star system. Now I should say right now that you may have heard of this game a fair while ago, with it initially being set for release in 2021, only to then be delayed until 2022, which fair enough, most games have been delayed a fair bit thanks to present conditions, but also this is an indie game and passion projects do not get made overnight. A Falling Frontier boasts some rather interesting combination of different mechanics brought about from entirely different genres. Overall, the game is a real-time strategy, meaning you'll be going out into a large expanse, moving your ships around all in real time and aiming to colonize and conquer planets or celestial bodies as you come across them. Of course, reacting immediately to threats lest you lose your ships, which, we'll get to soon, are incredibly valuable. And depending who's upon them, game-changingly so. A lot of the mechanics coming in from 4X strategy games and party management systems of squad-based RTS RPGs are actually present in this game. Not only is there a very wide selection of different skills and abilities that each of your ships will be able to use and utilize in combat as well as logistical endeavors, but you'll also be able to customize each of your ships and tailor them to your needs and the abilities of the crew that man them. Now, so far we've predominantly seen from various trailers and teasers a lot of the combat-based vessels going at each other and colliding destructively with the various asteroids found around the map, as well as the rather strategic use of some space-based storms. All of it's been rather impressive and quite visually satisfying to say the least, but before we get to that, I'd really like to highlight some of the mechanics that seem rather interesting being introduced into a space-based RTS that, having read them, I can't understand why I haven't seen more often in this genre of game. The celestial bodies not only provide a good way to control the line of sight of your opponents, but as we're in space and inevitably using scanners for a lot of this, at least I hope we are. If they actually have some kind of viewing window, then I kind of fear for their own safety. But in relying upon scanners, you will be able to trick them, not only by hiding your presence by clinging on to various moons and asteroids as you move by, but also masking your heat signatures near gas giants, using the very celestial phenomena available to the greatest strategic advantage. Well, seeing as we're still in early access, it'll be great to see just how much gets added in and how much the developer builds upon these ideas leading up to release, as well as of course post-launch. But I highlight them because I think it shows just what this game is about. This is an insanely in-depth RTS, providing the players with plenty of different options and plenty of opportunities to go about the game in whatever way you wish, taking as much advantage from whichever mechanics you find most appealing. If you want to be stealthy and hide your signature at all times, slowly creeping in towards the enemy, laying in wait and causing absolute havoc with your guerrilla tactics in space, feel free. If you'd rather just build the strongest, toughest ships you can and throw them in mighty fleets towards your opponent, well, that's an option as well. It's up to you to manage your resources and decide how you wish to confront each problem. And seeing as how each star system will be procedurally generated, this opens up for a lot of replayability and a lot of different styles of play you can try out as you seek to form your solar empire. Now, even though it's procedurally generated, don't let this confuse you. The game is a story-driven narrative experience, meaning there is a legitimate start and end to the game itself, or at least technically. We'll come to the ending soon, but as you progress, your choices along that narrative will decide how the end game plays out. Not to mention, as you explore the world, you will be able to find different side missions as you go. Now, the overall game takes place on what is referred to as the plane, and this basically refers to the 2D map that the game actually plays along, ensuring that you don't fly off completely randomly up into the face of the screen. The plane acts as the area of play, and by going below it, you'll allow yourself to be harder to see and harder to interact with the enemy. We will take some penalties and at a fair bit of risk, and adds into that risk-reward system that the entire game is built around. All of this can sound a little bit overwhelming, but don't worry too much, because right from the start when you select your faction, you'll be beginning in a small moon or possibly a planet with nothing more to worry about in the initial phase than setting up your colonies, setting up your infrastructure, or really having to worry about broadening yourself into the wider solar system. The lineages or factions available currently in Falling Frontier range from Pluto, Ceres, Mercury, Titan, Terra, Luna, Venus, Tethys, and Europa. When setting up your system, early game the resources you'll be needing are going to be fairly simplified, with the population of your citizenry, the credits they supply, and the access to fuels you will need in order to expand in the immediate vicinity, before expanding your area of influence by developing more spaceports and more supply depots to allow you to move further afield while maintaining those supply lines to ensure that you have enough food, fuel, munitions, and citizens available to man their post. However, that citizenry will only be able to increase, figure that one out yourself, while they are planet-side. As while in space, this is a military endeavor, and although having dug up a Roman fortification, I can definitely tell you the military do not tend to follow the rules. Well, let's just imagine for today they do. So while in space your population shall not be increasing, and atop this they shall be receiving some relief in their taxation owing to the sheer dangers of space, and if you're anything like me in strategy games, the likelihood of their timely and inevitable demise. And while those citizens are unable to go forth and populate, they'll be upon the ship and ensuring the running of your empire. This provides the key balance of the game in ensuring that you have enough citizenry planetside to maintain your population and ensure you have an income while taking those you need up into the stars, leveling them up and trying to develop them as best you can to get the most out of them before that demise comes up. And thanks to the wonders of the future, while in space, the revenue earned from your citizenry's taxation is accessible anywhere in the star system. It is all your other supplies, those arguably more important ones, at least to the vessels you're fielding, that will be needed to physically move. This is of course your food, fuel, and munitions that must be moved about the stars to keep your ships running. And it's actually this aspect that has me most intrigued, as setting up some kind of trade empire dealing in all kinds of resources and ensuring that my ships can do some light speed hopping about the map without ever needing to fear open conflicts with the enemy. Yes, the 5 railgun hot no armor ships will be jumping about and impossible to touch. It's slowly coming together. Of course, being human, for now, they will need food. Keeping nice and close to a colonized celestial body or spaceport will ensure you always have access to this, but as you go further and further afield or engage in those longer drawn-out military campaigns, this resource could well become depleted, leading to your citizenry to, unfortunately, starve aboard the ship. And though service does guarantee citizenry, citizenry does not guarantee life. But to help prevent this and ensure the logistics and military defense of your empire, you'll be able to install your own observation points. And what's really great about this is it does take the physical presence of those celestial bodies into account. Meaning if you stick one right next to a planet, well, good luck trying to check behind it. A key part to any empire is the amount of information at its disposal. And in space, that means probes. Setting up your probes essentially acts as scouting or watchtowers, allowing you to scan an area to see if there are any resources, anything useful you could pick up, or as an early warning to just what's coming at you. Not only will the placement of these probes be important, but also the angle and distance of their reconnaissance. In Falling Frontier, you can actually carve a very thin section of space but gain information from it at an extremely long distance, or broaden yourself out to a full 360 degrees while keeping that information gain pretty darn close, and of course changing the amount of information you will actually gain from it, as a focused or intense area of scanning will provide you with far more information of just what's going on the closer and closer it gets. So even if you do catch something out there, it may well be that you simply don't have enough information to discern what that something is, or potentially the full details of what is going on, with the devs themselves highlighting this by showing not only that some of your vessels can be hidden within the various anomaly at play, but also by maneuvering them correctly, keeping your ships close together and ensuring that their heat signatures are not too obviously individual. You could trick the enemy into believing there are fewer ships than there actually are, or a different type of ship altogether, not to mention various technologies that may well help in this endeavor. It's a bit of an interesting take given that we are supposed to be in three-dimensional space, but you can't really have everything in this kind of large-scale conflict. Plus, I'm a massive fan of Battlefleet Gothic, and this kind of gives an RTS vibe to that. Though there is definitely one thing I have noticed in the fact that since spaceships will knock into asteroids, they don't often seem to knock into each other. Now bear in mind that everything I've seen is super early access, so hopefully we can find a little bit of that later on, as I love the idea of just having a half-destroyed ship and sending it on a bit of a ramming expedition to see how many they can take out before, hopefully, bailing out the crew. Plus I used to play Tyranids and that was kind of the main point. Now, if I am to give any real criticism to this, it would really only come down to the fact that taking a look at some of the character models, the pictures of your crew, and they're all sort of lifelike. I get the idea and I understand the feeling, but they don't look like officers of a ship. They look more just like random Joe Plogs off the street, wearing plain shirts and having a fairly plain look to them. It is something I could get used to, but it does feel like they could do something a little bit cooler. Like, I appreciate the fact that these are supposed to be normal people going about their lives as part of your faction, but if this truly is my faction, the first thing I would introduce would be a uniform with cool collars and some kind of speaker system mounted into it. Maybe heads-up display goggles and hats. Lots of hats. I take it back, we get character customization. But it's not only their lives you'll have to be worried about, as they will hold information key to your empire's management, be that in terms of the logistical endeavors, the scientific research, or even those military plans that you've been working upon, which are all up for grabs should they find themselves being captured. Arguably, the good thing is that a lower ranking officer will not have a substantial amount of information. However, should you find yourself losing one of your superior officers, you could be in for a heck of a lot of trouble. But of course, this will go both ways, meaning keeping your eye out for some of the enemies may well be a darn good way to gain some better information about exactly what they're doing in their empire, even potentially tipping the tides of war via shutting down their logistical endeavors or setting up an ambush in the known position of their flotillas. But I suppose at the end of the day, your character doesn't really matter that much. Yes, they are important in terms of the information that they hold, but you're not really going to be looking at them. Instead, you'll be looking at your ships, and that is where all of the customization has been brought in. Now, the models we've seen so far, there is some variance to be seen, but I am very much hoping that we'll see even more variation within the ship styles and classes as the game goes closer and closer to release. This said, what you are able to customize within them is definitely noteworthy. Not only do you have internal structures being able to reinforce or even improve the capabilities of the elements of the ship that they are in charge of, but also fully customize the weaponry they will be using. And I see the word railgun. I want 5 of those on a single ship with no armor. Game on. As we see the combat, we actually have something that I'm still of two minds about. The game seems incredibly slow, and it definitely does have an effect in terms of how cinematic and how incredible the battles could be, as well as constantly reminding me of The Expanse and how much I really need to watch the next season of that. But the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I realized how good this actually is. Since everything is going to be moving quite slowly, and this is a real-time strategy game, when you're taking control of an entire solar system, you kind of need it to be a little bit slower, just working off those basic thrusters to give you a chance to actually control your empire when all hell breaks loose. Well, it's been described as visceral, and they aren't joking. Showing off a rather interesting stylized take on RTS in space that is, going for something I've at least more commonly seen in party management systems within RPGs. Within the turn-based genre, each of your ships is manned by their own crew, and within that crew, you will have the higher class officers, each of them their own physical entity upon the ship, capable of being harmed should they unfortunately find themselves in combat, but also able to be upgraded. Meaning if you can maintain your engineer, they may well be able to improve and substantially progress the capabilities of your ship in whatever you're doing with it. Be that working on the logistics of your empire and moving between the ludicrously large map, which things such as FTL drives are certainly going to be a necessity for, through to engaging in direct conflict. In order to maintain those officers though, you'll need to be ensuring you have a fair amount of resources available for them. That means ensuring you have enough munitions on each ship to actually engage in combat and enough food to keep everyone alive who's on it. Because should you lose one of those officers, it will be the citizens aboard that it falls to claim the mantle and replace your chain of command. With your citizenry and your finances being the two main concerns for your empire, it will be the actual ships themselves that care about the munitions available to them and the fuel upon each ship. For as we've seen from the sheer scape and scope of the map, you're going to be needing a lot of fuel to power those FTL drives to get around. As although you can move freely on your standard thrusters, you're not going to get that far and you're definitely not going to get there fast. Now, purely in combat, that's a whole lot of different things to consider, particularly as the whole game is based around ensuring you're on a risk-reward system, and, well, let's just say this game looks like it includes a lot of risk. But strangely, it's actually on the campaign map that I think you're going to see the largest consideration of all these tactical options, in particular in the form of exploration, since you'll be having to use scanners and sending them forth from your stations in order to see what is out there, from the many resources available to derelict ships you might be able to scavenge a little something from, all the way through to other celestial bodies, or even the enemy. Built heavily around the concept of a line of sight, an interesting topic considering we are in space, combat in this game is going to depend largely upon the terrain in which you're fighting, or the lack thereof. The various solar anomalies or celestial bodies all having their own presence within the game and all affecting how you'll engage with other ships as you move about the solar system, leaving only the most keen-eyed of observers or those skilled captains who remember to check through all of the different visual tools. On the left-hand side of the screen, there are a whole heap of different options, all providing different information to the player, and in particular, the ability to highlight physical objects on the map. And this is really important because all objects in space have a physical presence, and therefore, they will physically block your ability to see past them. Now, this not only is something to consider when you're engaging in combat to ensure you have a clear line of sight upon the enemy and good field of fire, but it also provides you plenty of options in terms of tactical situational awareness. Not only will you have to contend with them to ensure that your guns can target on and fire away free and clear at the enemy, with movement still being a little debatable. I've yet to actually see if you can take damage from these, as far as I can tell there is no repercussion for just flying smack into them, and there's no way unfortunately to break off a chunk of them and smash it into the enemy. It seems like a really simple thing to do, but we'll have to wait and see. But what we do know you can do is you actually can attach a ship to some of them, allowing you to hide tucked away from the enemy's sights, only to emerge wherever you so wish and deal as much damage as you can before getting the hell out of there. But in all honesty, the only troubles you're going to have and the most important parts of any strategy game are going to come down to those of your economy and the logistics that support it. Given the sheer expanse of an entire solar system you will be controlling, the ability to provide different supply depots and stations to rearm and refit your ships is going to make a huge difference in how much ships can move about and how quick they can as well. As although your thrusters, as said before, are infinite, you can use them as long as you like, they're also pretty darn slow, meaning you're going to need to jump at faster than light speed, something that will use up your resources substantially, requiring, as you guessed, the necessity to refuel when you arrive. It's a significantly more grounded approach to the concept of space opera RTS, and honestly is something I think has been needed for a very, very long time. We've seen these mechanics before, introduced into various different party management systems where you'll be moving around on foot, where your individual characters will have to engage in survival mechanics to keep going, as well as engaging in those RPG aspects of leveling up and customizing and smashing enemies to gain the experience, but introducing this into something of a shipbuilder and smacking it in space just seems incredibly logical. This is something everyone wants, everyone enjoys, and quite frankly, I can already see getting modded the hell out of for, you've guessed it, Star Wars, no doubt, Star Trek, Firefly, yeah, it's gonna happen. And actually mentioning Firefly, this really does remind me a lot of it. Somewhere between that and The Expanse, it's gone for that very grounded, dirty, muggy approach to space, movement, combat, and even the fact that upon those ships, those crews are physical entities and therefore capable of being lost, the impact of which is far more substantial with this grounded approach, giving it a little more humanity to the concept of a solar system spanning empire. But returning to the concept of empire management and the sheer level of customization available, we don't just end there. There are currently over 20 different ship types, including frigates, destroyers, cruisers, battle cruisers, alongside a host of civilian ships that you can craft, create, and design as you play your game. I would still like to see a little more variety in the actual construction, but a full 20 different ships is a pretty good place to start, especially when we can stick a whole bunch of railguns on them and just be done with it. And I'll leave us with a final note that in terms of modding so far, that over on the Steam page they have announced that Falling Frontier supports modding through an in-game scenario editor that allows players to design and share their own star systems, missions, and storyline campaigns. Add in a few graphical tweaks, and I'm going to be invading Klendafu. But at the end of all that, I hope you've had a good idea of what Falling Frontiers is all about, and if you do go and check them out, don't forget to tell them Bear sent you. Till next time, as always, peace out.